BB Novels presents Serenity Full Circle. The work of Mark and Ian, two former Navy SEALs, is extremely dangerous and at times deadly. This sample contains two scenes. Brace yourself for edge-of-the-seat action, adventure, and a little romance. Mark was on his third magazine of ammunition, trying to keep the balance of fire even. He was trying to buy the time necessary for Martin and Laurel to escape onto the runabout. He fired 2 more rounds when he noticed the pistol slide, now in the lockback position. He looked down, reaching to his vest for his 4th of 5 mags while ejecting the empty mag from the pistol. He heard a gunshot from behind, and then he saw a pistol sliding toward him from the port side of the ship across the deck, stopping about 2 yards out in front of him. As he looked up, he saw a man falling to his knees while grasping at his throat, making a gurgling sound as he fell forward onto the deck, blood gushing from the open wound. He looked back to see Dara moving toward him and firing several more rounds. She was now firing over his head, down the starboard walkway, as she moved to find cover. Mark tripped the side release on his pistol after slamming in a full magazine and said, "Are they clear?" Dara said, "All clear," as she moved up to his position behind the storage container, pulling a shoulder bag off. "There are more mags in there," pointing to the bag. Ian had retreated to the rear door of the cabin and jumped out through a metal frame of a large sliding glass door that had proved it was not bulletproof. He found cover to the right of Mark and Dara. She held up a full magazine of ammo, but he waved it off. He had all his magazines still in his vest as he held up the Uzi that he had confiscated. They could hear the runabout's engine cavitate as the craft turned sharply to move away from the yacht. Now the job at hand was straightforward. Mark said, "Let's stay on the outside and make our way back to the upper deck where we last saw Lagos." Ian looked at the man on the deck, now in a large pool of blood, and said, "With him down, that makes 7. 5 more to go. I'm beginning to like these odds a little better." Ian once again looked back into the deck cabin, double-checking to see if anyone was fool enough to be coming through there. It was clear. They started moving back toward the bow, one taking cover and watching, while the others were moving forward. They reached the bottom of the ladder next to the galley door that they had been near earlier. They were preparing to go up the steps when Mark heard a familiar sound, the twanging sound produced by the spoon being released on a hand grenade. Ian was on board as quickly as Mark. He opened the galley door and jumped inside. Mark spun around with his right arm, reached out, and caught Dara's midriff and pulled her in on top of him as he followed Ian into the galley. The grenade bounced once on the stairs and then fell to the deck, exploding just below the galley window. The cabin's 1/4-inch steel bulkhead was more than strong enough to withstand the grenade blast. The concussion of the explosion was still extreme. Without the bulkhead, anyone within 5 meters of the exploding ordnance would suffer a multitude of potential injuries, such as burst eardrums, or capillaries in the eyes and nose could very well rupture. The ill effects from the shrapnel would be life-threatening. But this was not the case today. Dara had been manhandled like a rag doll by Mark pulling her through the doorway. They were now on the floor. Dara sprawled out on top of him, face to face. Both were somewhat isolated by the ringing in their ears, but their eyes were locked intensely on each other, nearly touching noses. Mark had the desire to kiss her, but thought better of it. Dara, sensing something in Mark's eyes, moved on her own impulse, kissing him. When she had finished, Mark began to say something, but Dara raised her hand and placed her index finger over his lips, mouthing the words, "business first," with a distinct look of desire on her face. 5, 4, 3, 2. At 1, a kill fired, with Mark following suit 1 second later. A kill, drawing from all the reserves that were at hand, held the scope's laser on the fat boy's center of mass. A millisecond later, the wall behind turned a bright crimson red. The upper torso of the fat boy that had been in view quite simply disappeared. Before a killer Mark could react, the second bullet arrived at its destination. It was slightly high, but just as effective, as Kwan's head exploded like a ripe watermelon. They both withdrew their rifles and dropped down, settling in for the interim. Mark, looking over at Akil with glistening eyes, said, "Don't ever let him tell you that revenge isn't worth it." Author Ron Brooks hopes you enjoy Serenity as much as he enjoyed writing it for you.